It turns out that HRT, estrogen and progesterone combinations, Premarin and drugs like this, increase the risk of breast and uterine and ovarian cancer by 78%, increase the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease by 200%, increase the risk of cardiovascular disease by 200%. And a new study that just came out a couple of days ago, and again, I don't have a slide for it yet, and I apologize, increases your risk of asthma by 100%, increases your risk of gradual deafness as you get older by 30%. Why would anybody want to take HRT? Well, Dr. Wallach, you got to get rid of the hot flashes some way. I said, well, why would you risk all these terrible things just to get rid of hot flashes and night sweats? See, you're just a man. You have no idea. I mean, women used to beat me up all the time in my practice because I said, well, it's not worth it. And so we went back to the old Lydia Pinkham's formulas. And guess what? Worked like a charm. There's 29 major studies which shows that it gets rid of the hot flashes and night sweats. Then you throw in the liquid calcium, and guess what? 1,200 milligrams per serving. You deal with the concerns about osteoporosis. You don't have to have all the risk from the HRT. You don't have to have all the risk from HRT. This came out actually in 2000, and they said, and they predicted that the report on carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals, which was going to come out in January of 2002, is going to list estrogen as a cancer-causing chemical. Well, guess what? That report comes out every year. And guess what's at the top of the list of cancer-causing chemicals? Estrogen. What makes it most dangerous is doctors prescribe it. Doctors prescribe it. Obesity. 40% of Americans are overweight now. They're obese, 30 pounds overweight over their ideal weight for their body type and height and so forth. 40% of Americans are obese. This is relatively new. 50 years ago it was like 15%, and 100 years ago there was very rarely, less than 1% of Americans were obese. And it turns out it's caused by a simple, single problem. I can walk on a horse farm, and I can tell you in 30 seconds if the horses on that farm are getting all the minerals they need. This is a little working wagon in an Amish farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I walked on that place, and I knew immediately that the horses weren't getting all the minerals they needed because the horses were eating, nibbling all along this buckboard rail, and then they just ate this one particular place. Why did they eat that one particular place? Because that's where the farmer put his hand when he jumped out of the wagon every time. His hot, sweaty hand full of what? Salt. Okay? Now, my daddy had a fourth-grade education, and he knew every time he'd see our cattle chewing on the fence and eating dirt and chewing on the feed box instead of eating the feed, they were minerally deficient. He'd give them minerals, and it'd go away. And we usually learned painfully when we were a kid that it's not socially acceptable to chew on the furniture and eat dirt. Bam! Don't do that anymore. That chair costs a lot of money. Ooh, okay. If you're that hungry, go into the kitchen and have a piece of pie and ice cream, or eat a Twinkie, or have a RC and a moon pie. And so people began to recognize these cravings, which we call pica and cribbing in animals and munchies in people. The munchies in people are pica and cribbing in animals. Pica and cribbing in animals are the munchies in people. And so we've been taught that these cravings and the munchies are due to a Twinkie deficiency. Now, if we were taught as kids that this is caused by a mineral deficiency, we'd all take minerals that have 0 calories in them. Americans would all be slim. Weight problems are nothing more than a mineral deficiency disease. Now, nobody knows more about weight gain, weight loss than veterinarians. Why is that? When you put an animal into the feedlot, what are they supposed to do? Lose weight or gain weight? Gain weight. So we know the technology. And snack food companies know this. They spend a lot of money on research learning the technology of weight gain. And they fix their little snacks to make sure that you just can't eat one. In fact, one of them, Lay's potato chips, even uses that as their motto on their bag. You just can't eat one. And so they fix it so you're minerally deficient if you eat their stuff. Okay? But if you take your minerals, the cravings go away. And that alone, you can lose 10, 15, 20 pounds just because you're not desiring to eat things between meals. You're not going to sit there and watch TV and fill your face all night because you don't have those cravings anymore. It's not a problem with your self-respect. It's not a problem. You don't have a deficiency of hypnosis. You don't have a deficiency of acupuncture. You don't have a deficiency of ephedra. You have deficiencies of minerals. You take your mineral program, need a couple of meal replacers a day, give up some carbohydrates, which you learn from Clive McKay and William Banting and so forth, and Bob Atkins. You give up carbohydrates in your bread and your pastas and your rice and your potatoes, and you're going to lose weight and keep it off. It won't come back as long as you stay on that program. But as soon as you go off your minerals, the cravings start up again because it's a mineral deficiency. You'll always get rid of the cravings within 10 to 14 days. Now I want to talk briefly about 3 serious ones. We're first going to talk about cancer, some of the more serious diseases. This came out in 1997. We had spent $30 billion on a war on cancer. This bill was signed by Nixon when he was in office. And despite 26 years of spending this $30 billion, researchers suggest putting emphasis on prevention. Now, you give me $30 billion, 1 year's time, I'll find you a cure. And why couldn't they find a cure for $30 billion? I mean, we only took $100 million to fly a man to the moon, put him on the moon's surface, pick him up, and bring him back. $100 million to do that. $30 billion, they looked for a cure, but they didn't think outside the box. They weren't really looking for a cure. They spent all their time looking for a better chemotherapy with your tax money, because that's where the money is. Well, during that time, every 5 years or so, they doubled the amount of money for research. The death rate remained the same. So they weren't looking in the right place, obviously, or really looking that hard. I know your doctors didn't tell you about this one. This one came out in October of 1998. There was a Harvard Nurses Health Study. It had 90,000 nurses, 20 years of data, and they could only use 15 years of the 20 years of data in the study for these 90,000 nurses because for the first 5 years there were not enough nurses using multiple vitamins. And what they found out was these 90,000 nurses who take multiple vitamins for at least 15 years can cut the risk of colon cancer by 75%. Are there any drugs that will do that? Is there a drug in the market that will cut your risk of colon cancer by 75%? No. How come your doctors didn't email you, call you up, call you, bring you in and say, look, here's something really remarkable. Just by taking one multivitamin every day, you can reduce your risk of colon cancer by 75%. Yahoo! Did they do that? No. I bet not a single one of you got any direct communication from your medical doctor telling you this. They read it in their journals, a Harvard Nurses Health Study. Whether you believe it or not, how many of you ever heard that a low-fat diet will reduce your risk of colon cancer and breast cancer and all kinds of cancers? How many of you heard that? Whether you believe it or not. Yeah. This is one of the American Cancer Society, doctors, the American Medical Association. Everybody says low-fat diets will reduce your risk of cancer, high-fat diets increase your risk of cancer. Harvard Nurses Health Study, 90,000 nurses, 20 years of data. They compared the rate of cancer in these 90,000 nurses, comparing those that had more than 50% of their calories as fat, which is a very, very high-fat diet, compared to those that had less than 20% of their calories as fat, which is a very low-fat diet. And if fat content of your diet had anything to do with the rate of cancer, the ones having more than 50% of their calories as fat should have a lot more cancer than the ones having less than 20%. I mean, that's real simple stuff, right? Well, this came out in March of 1999. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Again, they compared the rate of cancer in these 90,000 nurses, comparing those that had less than 20% of their calories as fat versus those that had more than 50% of their calories in fat. They found no measurable difference. The amount of fat you eat in your diet has nothing to do with the rate of cancer. The amount of fat you eat in your diet has nothing to do with the rate of cancer. Nothing. It turns out the amount of fat in your diet has nothing to do with the rate of cancer. It's how you cook the fat. It's how you cook the fat. Not the amount of fat, it's how you cook the fat. This study came out in 1998, University of South Carolina. Big study. Study links very well done meat to breast cancer, and then later on to prostate cancer and colon cancer. Among women who preferred all their meat very well done with a doneness score of 9, where the fat was burnt, and it tastes very good, believe me, burnt fat tastes very good. I used to eat it when I was a kid. There was a 462% greater chance of having breast cancer than for women who ate their meat rare or medium. Not a 5% increase in risk. Not a 50%, not a 100%, not a 200%, not a 300%, not a 400%, but a 462% increase in risk of getting breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer if you eat your meat cooked well done and eat burnt animal fat. Now, after tonight, you can't claim you were not informed. If you go home, you continue to eat burnt animal fat, whether it's in hot dog skins over the fire, you know, or you're grilling chicken skin and eating it that way, or you're grilling your hamburgers burnt. You know, I get people, I cringe. People, I want my hamburger burnt. I don't want to see anything pink in there. I want it burnt. I want like charcoal. They're doomed. Even God can't help them. You know, when you're that stupid, God can't help you. And when you're at the bottom end of the gene pool, He's got to let you go. whether you believe it or not, how many of you heard that a high fiber diet will reduce your risk of colon cancer? Whether you believe it or not, how many of you heard that? Yeah, that's another one of those truisms that the American Cancer Society and your doctor wants you to believe. Of course, Quaker Oats likes that one, right? Low-fat diet, high-fiber diet. Harvard Nurses Health Study, 90,000 nurses. They compared the rate of colon cancer, these 90,000 nurses, comparing those that had a high-fiber diet versus a low-fiber diet. They didn't like the results, so they threw in 50,000 male doctors. They compared their rate of colon cancer, the ones who had a high-fiber diet versus those that had a low-fiber diet. Now they had 140,000 human subjects, and this came out in January of 1999. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, very respectable medical journal. 90,000 female nurses, 50,000 male doctors. They said high-fiber diets don't cut colon cancer by any measurable amount. Zero. Nada. Eating a high-fiber diet did not protect you in any way, shape, or form from any cancer. Zero. Why do doctors get so excited about a high-fiber diet? Because it will reduce your cholesterol. That's because it absorbs everything that you eat, including minerals that are required to keep you from getting high blood pressure, osteoporosis, arthritis, cancer. And so people who eat multigrain breads for their toast and English muffins and pancakes and waffles for breakfast, people who eat multigrain pastas, people who eat multigrain breads and whole wheat breads and grind their own wheat and all that sort of stuff for their sandwiches, and people who eat whole wheat and multigrain bread for dinner, eat whole wheat ice cream. I mean, you can go to extreme, right? They have a 500% increase in risk of all these other degenerative diseases which kill you. So by eating a high-fiber diet, your risk of those other diseases goes up and doesn't affect your risk of cancer at all. The only thing that doctors get excited about, really, about a high-fiber diet is it lowers your cholesterol. And does that do anything for you? No. Doesn't do a thing. You reduce your risk of colon cancer by 60 to 80% by eating dark berries, raspberries, black raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, black cherries, strawberries, according to the Ohio University. Big study by Ohio University. Reduce your risk of colon cancer by 60 to 80%. How many of you ever heard of trace mineral selenium? Good. How many of you heard that trace mineral selenium is a great antioxidant that's going to reduce your risk of cancer, whether you believe it or not? How many of you heard that? Okay, well, this has been kind of a recent thing. They're kind of growing crazy over selenium. In fact, the information on selenium really came out in April of 1912 in this very famous medical journal called Popular Mechanics. April of 1912. And this fellow here, Professor Dr. von Wassermann from Berlin, who went on about 10 years later to get a Nobel Prize in medicine, said that he had discovered a chemical substance that will cure cancer in mice. It turns out it's the trace mineral selenium. The selenium has a selective action against cancer cells but doesn't hurt healthy tissues. Dr. Wassermann believed that the cancer in mice were so similar to those in humans that he believed an important advance had been made towards the cure of that veritable scourge cancer in people. Well, this was April of 1912. We began to put the trace mineral selenium into animal feed pellets back in April of 1912 to keep their rate of cancer down. And this lay dormant for 84 years in human medicine and nutrition until December of 1996.